Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us on this ACE Live webinar. My name is Jackie Crockford, and I will be your host. And today I am joined by our panelist, Tom Richards. Tom, say hi.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Thank you, Jackie.
Okay, let's get started with our webinar. Today we're going to be hearing about the COVID-19 emergency relief bill that has recently gone through Washington, and we're going to be hearing about that from Tom Richards. As I mentioned, Tom is the current director at ACE of Stakeholder Engagement, and he is based in Washington, D.C., and he is the former president of the National Coalition for Promoting Physical Activity and has also served formerly as the co-chair of the business and industry sector of the original National Physical Activity Plan. So really important piece of the world that we live in as health and fitness professionals. And Tom is the exact right person to be talking to about this Relief Act, also has a law degree and spends his time just hanging out in Washington, D.C., right, Tom?
Just hanging out. That's
So, Tom, you're the right, like I said, you're the exact right person to be talking to about this bill. Let us know a little bit just from the start here, just an overview, just a high-level overview of what the CARES Act is about.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. Before I get into the bill, I just want to say that I hope everyone's doing okay out there and hanging in there. I know there's a lot of fear and anxiety and just a lot of challenging emotions right now. And if you're feeling that way, please know that you're not alone. We're here to support you. We're with you, and we're grateful for the opportunity to support you through this time. Now, as for the legislation coming out of DC, they just passed the largest economic relief bill in American history, and it's $2.4 trillion. It's called the CARES Act. Now, it's not perfect by any means, and it's likely not enough. There's already some talk of doing another stimulus bill, but it's a start, and it's a meaningful start, and there are some real opportunities that I want folks to be aware of. We're excited to tell people about these. I'm looking forward to talking through those opportunities in this webinar, answering some questions, trying to talk through it in a way that makes some sense and doesn't get too far in the weeds. And really, I think a great outcome to me would be for folks to come away from this webinar feeling like there's some real options to consider. And secondly, maybe with a sense of some renewed hope that we're going to get through this and that we'll all thrive again in due time. So I'm looking forward to this. Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks, Tom. So as you just mentioned, the goal of today's webinar is to really help our professionals, those who are in the exercise, health, fitness industry, is to understand what this bill is about and how it impacts you as that professional. It's important to note here that in no way are we offering any legal advice. That's not what we're here to do, but rather we want to help everyone who's watching and listening today understand how this bill might affect them in their role as a health and exercise professional. So there's a few main topics that we're going to cover today. We are going to start with the direct cash rebates that are a part of this bill. We'll go into the unemployment benefits and small business loans. We'll also hopefully get into a little bit of the paid leave, employee tax reduction tax credit rather, and then if we have some time, maybe the Social Security tax holiday as well. So we'll start with maybe something that is a little bit, a little bit feeling more urgent to folks these days. So Tom, I'm going to ask you about those direct cash rebates. Talk to us about what those mean as a part of the bill, how they work, and who will be getting those tax rebates. Or excuse me, the direct cash.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. I think that's a great place to start because it's some good news for most Americans. It's the cash rebate, or you might have heard it called the stimulus payment. Essentially, it's a direct payment from the IRS, from the federal government to Americans, and there's a limit of the most you can receive is $1,200. But how much you receive is really based on your income. So if you reported on your taxes up to $75,000 of gross income last year, you can expect to receive the full $1,200 check. And that should, they're saying that'll be sent out within the next 3 weeks or so. So there's hope that it'll arrive in either your direct deposit or in your mailbox sometime maybe in the end of April. Now, if you make more than $75,000, and last year that's what you reported, you can still receive a rebate, but it phases out between $75,000 and $99,000. And then after $99,000, you don't receive the rebate. However, if you're married and you file jointly, then you can combine the income with your partner, and then the limits are between $150,000 for the top payment, or for the full payment of $2,400, and that phases out at $198,000. I would also add that dependents are also eligible for a $500 payment. So if your income was, say, $50,000 last year and you have 2 children under the age of 17, then you'd be eligible for a $1,200 payment because of your income, and then $500 for each one of your dependents. So I think that's some good news that's going to impact a lot of Americans. And I know I'm throwing out a lot of numbers, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions as we go through this, of course.
Great, thank you, Tom. And it's important to mention that amount is based on your gross income, correct?
Yeah, it's your gross income that you would have reported on your 2019 taxes. If you haven't filed 2019, they say they're going to look at 2018. And for most people, they don't have to do anything to actually get the payment. If you're on file, if you have a Social Security number, indications are that you will just automatically get this payment. If you don't receive the payment, by the end of April, early May, then that's something to look into. But there's no application or anything like that.
Great. So no application, it would be a direct deposit potentially, if that's how you receive your tax refunds in the past based on the last time you filed taxes. How long will individuals be eligible to receive this benefit?
So it's a one-time benefit that all the checks should go out in the next 4 weeks or so. Will they do another one? We don't know. That could be additional legislation, but the CARES Act, this massive $2.4 trillion bill that was just passed, is only for one stimulus payment at this time.
Great, thank you so much. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to type those into the questions box. We'll be coming back to Tom at the end here of our presentation to make sure that we get to some of those questions. Tom, let's move on now, if it's okay with you. Anything else you want to say about the direct cash rebates?
No, I think that's good for now. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, great. So let's move on now to those unemployment benefits as a part of the CARES Act. So there are some unemployment benefits mentioned in this new act. And let's talk about first who is eligible to receive these unemployment benefits as a part of the CARES Act.
Yeah, thanks. The CARES Act makes 3 important changes to unemployment law, and the first one is around eligibility. Now, typically we think of unemployment for employees who have lost their job through no fault of their own from an organization. A business has laid people off and they're eligible for unemployment. What the CARES Act does is opens up eligibility for unemployment to independent contractors, sole proprietors. So folks who are working for themselves can still apply for, or I shouldn't say still, can now apply for unemployment, whereas that wasn't the case. And this is only going to be for a temporary time, but it's available currently. So,
that's great, Tom. And I want to kind of clarify there for people. Previously, prior to this act, as you mentioned, if I'm an independent contractor, meaning I file 1099, is that what we're talking about, right?
Yeah,
If
if
I
you file
file,
a 1099, you can at this time file for unemployment benefits, and you will do that through your state unemployment office. So if you were to, Google your state and unemployment office, make sure it's the actual correct state website. That's where you would go to apply. Um, uh, yeah, so that's an eligibility. I can talk about amount and duration as well.
great, yeah, so yeah, let's get into that. What is the amount of this unemployment benefit that people might be receiving here?
Yeah, so this was another important difference. Each state traditionally has different amounts for the maximum weekly amount. So if you're collecting unemployment, the maximum might be, 500 in California, 300 in Mississippi. It varies from state to state. What the CARES Act does is add an additional $600 to the weekly benefit, regardless of what your individual state has as a maximum. So if you're in a state where the maximum is $350 per week, that's going to increase to $950 a week. And that additional $600 lasts through the end of July. So that the CARES Act sort of commits to the $600 payment from now through the end of July. So that's important. That hits every state, everyone applying for unemployment at this time.
Great, and that's a large jump for folks, right? And that additional $600 per week.
Yeah, it is. The theory behind it is that the average income in America is about $50,000, and the average unemployment weekly average is between $400 and $500. So if they can get people up to the $1,000 a week baseline, then they think that that'll keep the economy going at some rate and keep people in their homes and paying some bills to some degree. Like I said, it remains to be seen if it's enough. I don't want to suggest that it's everything we can do at this time.
Right. And you did mention that this will extend through the end of July, this unemployment benefit?
Yeah, so the $600 extends through July. But there is a third important new change to the law, and that applies to the duration of unemployment benefits. Again, states vary in how long you can go on unemployment. I think the max is 26 weeks. Some states have 26 weeks, some states might be 23, 20 weeks. What the CARES Act does is extend unemployment for every state by 13 weeks. So if you're in a state that currently allows 26 weeks of unemployment, then you are now eligible for 39 weeks of employment. If you're in a state with 20, you're now eligible for 33. Now, a caveat there, or an exception, is that the $600 payment only lasts through July. So after July, you revert back. Even if you're still on unemployment, you're going to go back to what your state's original limit was.
Great. So if you are unemployed until July, I'm an independent contractor, which means I can now apply for this unemployment benefit. I remain unemployed until the end of July. I would, up until that point, be receiving the additional $600 per week.
Yes.
After that point, an additional however many weeks is left. I have up to 13 more weeks left to remain unemployed. I would be going back to my state's maximum amount.
Yes, and it may be more than the 13. It depends on how many weeks you have left in your total. But after July 31st, the weekly amount will revert back to what your state's original maximum was.
Got it. Great. Perfect. Thank you for that clarification. So how do people apply for these unemployment benefits?
Yeah, it's a federally backed program right now, but you apply through your state unemployment office. And as you can imagine, the unemployment offices and systems are being kind of overwhelmed right now. So I would encourage folks to get into the queue, line up, call. If this is the option that's right for you, do it early, because a lot of folks, we're having the most unemployment we've seen in our nation's history right now. So the systems are overwhelmed.
Right, right. So get in early and and see if you can take advantage of these as soon as possible.
Yes, if this is the option for you.
Right, so let's talk about another option then. And I actually do see a few questions popping in about this, so it's great that we're moving on to small business loans.
Yeah.
That's our next topic here. So talk to us a little bit about how the CARES Act addresses small businesses and maybe some of the hardships that they might be going through right now. There's a Paycheck protection program as part of this in the CARES Act. So let's talk about that a little bit first.
Yes, great. So there's two loan programs for small businesses that I really want us to highlight and focus on. And what's great about these two loan programs is that each one has the potential to effectively convert from a loan into basically a grant for a certain amount of it. So these are really important to look into and consider. And you mentioned the first one, the Paycheck Protection Program. It's a brand new program that was created by the CARES Act. And what it does is it allows independent contractors, small business owners, sole proprietors to apply for loans through your local bank. So these are SBA federally granted or federally approved loans, but you get them through your local bank. If you have a relationship with someone, in your town, you'd go through them to get these loans. And the loans are intended to pay for things like payroll expenses, utility, things to keep the business going and up and running. Because really the CARES Act is designed to keep people off unemployment. They don't want people to be unemployed. They want people to maintain their employment. So they're infusing cash through things like the Paycheck Protection Program. Now, the amount of the loan that you can apply for depends on your average monthly payroll. So if you look at the last 12 months, take your average monthly payroll, multiply that by 2.5, and that's the size of the loan that you can apply for through the Paycheck Protection Program. There is a limit at $10 million. So if your payroll is averaging $4 million a month, then that would be your max. But I think that limit would be good for most of the folks in our industry. Yeah, so that's the loan. I can talk. There's a great thing about forbearance. I mentioned that it can turn into a grant. And here's how the loan can turn into what would feel like a grant.
And I'll just clarify there, Tom. This is great information. So when we talk about loans, and just to make sure everybody's on the same page, meaning a loan has to be paid back to that bank that you received it from. And what you're kind of moving into now is referring to grants, in which these loans would then turn into potentially a grant in which you would not need to pay back. Is that correct?
Yeah, now it's still considered a loan. And this is where it gets a little tricky. But when you receive the loan, so you've applied for whatever amount works for you based on your limit. When you receive the loan, the bank will start an 8-week sort of time period. And at the end of that 8 weeks, if you've used that loan to pay for things like payroll, utility expenses, keeping the lights on, that portion of that loan will be forgiven. You would not have to pay that back. So that's a really important option for people to consider. It's available. I believe these will become available Friday of this week, maybe sooner. Again, this legislation just passed the end of last week, and there's a massive administrative system that needs to be created to fulfill these loans. So they're trying to get up to speed. But if this sounds interesting to you, I would contact your bank immediately, because I'm already hearing some long wait times on phones and that kind of thing.
Right. So it's your role as the business owner to contact the bank and apply through your local bank to receive these loans, correct?
Yes.
Great. Perfect. So that's how you would apply for that loan, the Paycheck Protection Program loan. And how long are these available for folks?
I want to say these are available to apply for through, let me check my notes. You can apply to them through June 30th of 2020.
Great, great. So there's also something else related to small business that we want to talk about here, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Tell us a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, so these are loans that have been in existence for a while through the Small Business Administration. What they're used for is if there's like a tornado that hits a county or a hurricane hits a part of the region, that area of the country has traditionally been designated to be eligible for an economic injury disaster loan. What the CARES Act does is effectively makes the whole country eligible as a disaster area for this type of loan. So everybody is now eligible to apply for a disaster loan. And you apply for it through SBA.gov. That's the Small Business Administration. That's a federal website. What they're saying is that if you apply, you will automatically get $10,000 of your loan, the loan application, sent to you within 3 days. That's what the legislation says. I'm already hearing that it's not happening within 3 days, but it still should be happening soon. These loans can be, the limit on these loans is $2 million, but similar to the Paycheck Protection Program, that first $10,000, if it's used for things like payroll to keep the lights on, again, they're trying to keep businesses afloat and keep people with some semblance of economic security, then that $10,000 can be forgiven. Now, there's going to be details and there's some salary limits in there, like if someone makes $200,000, you can't pay their whole salary with this. So there's some details in there, but it's a really important option to consider and look into. You can't use like the Paycheck Protection Program and the disaster loans for the same thing, but it does appear from the legislation that you can use them for different things. So look into both opportunities, discuss both opportunities with your bank or with the Small Business Administration.
Great. So if I am a small business owner, I am eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. I am also eligible for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan as well. I'm eligible for both, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
But I can't use them to pay for the same things within my business.
Right, but it can be, they're kind of like extensions. So it's kind of like two different infusions of cash into the business. And if you use them the right way, the loans can be forgiven. And of course, it's really important to look at the details of the loan to make that happen. And I should add though that the Paycheck Protection Program, the key thing to getting your loan forgiven is maintaining payroll, meaning not laying people off, keeping people whole. If you lose an employee, then your forgiveness level goes down and it kind of tapers down from there.
Great, okay. And you said in order to apply for the economic injury disaster loans, people should look at SBA.gov, correct?
Let's go to SBA.gov.
Great. So right now, that link is actually posted in the chat bar. If you're watching right now, you can use that website to apply if this is a right fit for you, the economic injury disaster loan, if that's a right fit for you and your small business in the fitness industry, you can go to SBA.gov and get more information there. So just a couple other things here that we want to get into. Paid leave is what we'll talk about next as part of the CARES Act. So Tom, if you could help us understand what changes have been made to paid leave with regard to this bill.
Yeah, so the CARES Act makes 3 changes to paid leave. It basically makes 3 different categories of people eligible for paid leave. all related to the coronavirus, COVID-19. The first is if you are sick, feeling symptoms, if you are quarantined, then you are eligible for paid leave. If you are caring for somebody who is sick or quarantined, then you are eligible for paid leave. And lastly, and I think this applies to a lot of Americans, if you are at home taking care of a child who would otherwise be at school or at a daycare of some sort, but the school is shut down or the daycare has been shut down, and so now you're at home with that child, you are eligible for paid leave. Now there are some limits to that paid leave. If you're sick yourself, the maximum paid leave through the CARES Act is $511 per day for 2 weeks or for 80 hours. And that's the maximum. That would depend on some calculations based on what your income was before. If you're at home taking care of somebody, then the max is $200 a day. And that's based on, again, your salary, and it takes 2/3 of your income and maxes it out at $200 a day. And that's also for 80 hours or 2 weeks. In the case of being at home with a child, you're also eligible for $200 a day. And the original legislation, or the original language, says for 2 weeks. Again, it says $200 max, again, depending on what your income was. It's for 2 weeks, but the legislation allows that to be extended to 10 weeks because I think the policymakers are clearly looking out saying kids are probably not going to be at school. Kids are not going to be at school, I should say, in a week and a half from now, which would have been 2 weeks from when the bill was passed. So that piece will likely be extended out for 10 weeks. And like I said, who knows what they'll do with more legislation and extend that out. But that's something to look into. The way that gets paid for is through your employer, and then your employer is entitled to payroll tax credits. So your employer pays you for leave, and then the federal government basically pays your employer back through a payroll tax credit. So it gets tricky in there, but it's possible. And there are some exemptions for some small businesses that can't make that happen, can't pay the leave. There's some exemptions available. It's not clear how you get exempt though.
Great. So to clarify, the paid leave then would be for someone, if I'm in the fitness industry, who is employed as an employee, correct? I'm not acting as an independent contractor. How does that work?
Great question. That's an excellent question. It does apply for self-employed individuals.
Okay.
So this is something, still needs to be clarified a little bit as the regulations come out and how this starts getting implemented. But it appears that self-employed individuals can take paid leave and then use a payroll tax credit to sort of pay themselves back. Because if you're self-employed, it's like you're paying yourself. But then you can use a payroll tax credit to sort of make yourself whole with what you paid yourself, if that makes sense.
Yes. Okay. Great.
How this all works is kind of to be determined, but it's something that I really want folks to be aware of and be keeping their eye out for. Right.
So to receive the paid leave, how does that work? When do these benefits expire? If there are any more details there you could share, that'd be great.
Yeah, the benefits, like I said, they're going to be paid by the employer. If you're self-employed, I would talk to your payroll processor, exactly sort of how to make that work. I'm sure the IRS is going to be coming out with more guidance. I know ACE is, we've committed to putting up the resources as they're made available through the government. So check our resource page for ways to do that. It appears that the tax credits will be available through December 31st of this year. So that would cover folks who are experiencing symptoms, who knows, July, going into August. Of course, no one knows when this ends, but the law extends through December 31st for these particular paid leave exceptions.
Okay, great. And Tom, you just mentioned that ACE is putting up resources as they become available. Right now, that link is in your chat box. If you are watching right now on the GoToWebinar dashboard, that's general.acefitness.org/COVID-19. That link is live on the ACE website, and a lot of resources are there to help you as a health and fitness professional navigate during this time. Tom, I want to be able to get to some of the questions that are coming in. We do have quite a few questions that are flowing through here, which is great. A lot of people interested in wanting to understand how the CARES Act affects them as health and fitness professionals. Do you want to say anything, though, just briefly about the employee retention tax credit or the Social Security tax holiday, either of those two things, which are also a part of this bill?
Yeah, and I'll just touch on both of these briefly, because neither one of these are available to folks who take out a Paycheck Protection Program loan. So this would be a whole different option. I think most of the folks on this call would probably be more interested in the Paycheck Protection loans or the economic disaster loans. But you should be aware that the employee retention tax credit is a tax credit that allows organizations to take a payroll tax credit on 50% of an employee's salary for each quarter. It's available between now and December 31st. It's 50% on the first $10,000 of an individual's salary, so it's like a $5,000 tax credit. That's something to look into, be aware of. Again, it's called the Employee Retention Tax Credit. We cover it a little bit on the FAQ section that we have on the ACE website. The other option is the Social Security tax holiday, and this allows organizations to defer payment of the Social Security tax portion of their payroll tax. So you basically, an organization could keep the cash to themselves that they would otherwise be sending into the government for the Social Security portion, and pay half of it in 2021 and the other half in 2022. I'm not sure. I think these are less applicable to most folks who'll be watching this, but something to be aware of and to think through with the range of options.
Great, thanks, Tom. So like I said, I want to get to some of the questions here that are coming through, and I do want to just reiterate that Tom is our resident expert here in this area, as he is our advocacy person in the American Council on Exercise and lives in Washington, D.C., and kind of has his hand on the pulse of what's going on right now, but in no way should anything that you're hearing here be understood as legal advice. It's really important to go to your own state web pages and your own banks, your own financial institutions to understand kind of how these things work for you specifically from a legal standpoint. Tom, anything else you want to say about that?
No, I hope folks are hearing some things that they're excited about looking into and maybe giving them a little hope. Details are still coming out. I've been listening to webinars and reading things from accounting groups as recently as last night, and they're still trying to figure out what this CARES Act looks like and the timing on certain things. So there's a lot of uncertainty as to how this all works, but the programs are, as outlined anyways, have passed, they're in place, and the cash is available.
Great. So Tom, let's go through a few scenarios. I think this might be helpful for people as I'm watching some of the questions come in here. A lot of different scenarios are coming up. I'm this type of employee, I have this type of business, what's kind of the best situation for me? And maybe you can help us understand, depending on how our professionals are acting or are employed in the industry, what direction they might be looking into a little bit further, as you mentioned, to go to those resources that we have on our ACE webpage. So if I am a fitness professional who is employed at a facility like a large corporate gym setting. I have an employer, I receive a paycheck regularly. During this time, I'm not working, obviously, and therefore not receiving a paycheck. How should this CARES act for me? What is my next step that I should be looking into here as an employee?
Yeah, excellent question, and probably something that's very applicable to a lot of folks. And also the hardest type of question, the what should I do are the hardest types of questions. The only way I can really answer this is to say you should look into a few different things. If you're still employed but you're not receiving a paycheck, check with your unemployment office. Check with your HR department. They should be getting this type of guidance as well. Your state may have some unemployment assistance for being underemployed, for folks whose hours have dropped significantly due to COVID-19. So look at unemployment. Look at I guess paid leave probably wouldn't be applicable unless you were feeling symptoms or you were with a child. But yeah, I would check with unemployment, check with your HR. They're digesting this right now too, because it's a whole new landscape all of a sudden. I wish I could be more specific, because I know people are what exactly does this mean? And that's just hard to tell right now.
Right, exactly. So let's talk about a little bit of a different scenario then, and some of the things that we might be looking into if I am an independent contractor.
Yeah.
I've been in the fitness industry. Maybe I'm a group fitness instructor or a personal trainer who trains maybe out of my own place or maybe out of different places. I go and teach at different locations or different studios, but I act as an independent contractor and I'm not working right now or bringing in that income. What are the important things about this act that I need to know and be looking into right now?
Yeah, I would be, if that was me, I would be looking into the Paycheck Protection Program right now, seeing what kind of loan is available to me, weighing that option against the unemployment option. But yeah, contact your local bank, whoever you have a relationship with. Most likely they will be the ones who can facilitate the Paycheck Protection Program. Also, the economic disaster loan. That's something that can be available to you. Apply. You might get, depending on your particular situation, you could get up to $10,000 in the next few days that can be used to try to give you some sort of economic relief or some kind of base to keep you going forward.
Great, thank you. So sort of maybe a different spin on that scenario. And in the United States, we have different types of business structures, right? I can be an S Corp, I can be an LLC, independent contractor is a different type, right? There's a lot of different scenarios that I might find myself in depending on my state as well.
Yep.
So as you're mentioning, it's important to go to your state websites and understand what it is happening by state. But should I be looking into anything different if I am an independent contractor versus an LLC versus an S Corp, or have just those different business structure setups?
That's a great question. And the law seems to make determination, the CARES Act makes determinations not so much based on your structure, because it's trying to be as inclusive as possible, but more on the number of employees that you have. So if we're talking about businesses that have more than 500 employees, there's some different things that we haven't talked about today. But for folks who are small, what they think of as a small business, being under 500 employees, independent contractors, sole proprietors, all of those types of structures, whether it be an LLC or whatnot, are eligible to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program or the disaster loan. And I would encourage, if you're not sure if you're eligible, apply. Take the time and take the initiative to apply, because the funding is available, and they're trying to keep people going right now.
Great, thank you. So a couple questions here that I'm seeing come in on our questions box, and if we don't quite get to your question today, we will be continuing the conversation here with Tom. I'll ask you, Tom, to join our conversation on our ACE Fitness Facebook page when the recorded version of this webinar is available in the next couple of days. So you can continue to ask your questions there on our Facebook page when this link is available. Also, remember that you can find more information, and we are posting links and other resources on our general.acefitness.org/COVID-19 page. That link is also in your chat bar right now. But one of the other questions that are coming in is around the idea of furlough. And I know that's a term that people are hearing right now in the state of the world. So if I am furloughed, do I have any options here related to the CARE Act?
It does seem like you could have some unemployment options, and that's something to look into. If you have a loss of income right now due to coronavirus, so your hours have been reduced or you've been furloughed completely, look into unemployment. It's also possible that maybe your organization that you work for is just digesting the new law, also the Paycheck Protection Program, and looking at its options, because the law is designed to try to keep people on payrolls. So HR departments are trying to figure this out right now. So maybe unemployment's the right option for you. Maybe your organization's looking at trying to get a loan that can keep people back on the payroll. So it's hard to say what specifically is the right thing to do. Look at both options. Talk to your HR. Talk to your state unemployment office as well.
Great, thank you so much. So another question that we have here in the next few moments around filing for that unemployment that you just mentioned. Important to go to your own state website in order to do that, correct?
Yes.
And generally speaking, I know that there are certain requirements for the ability to receive that unemployment check. For instance, looking for another job. You have to show that you've been seeking other employment. Is that still a part of what's happening right now? Has that changed at all? Are there any other aspects of this CARES Act that reflect in how unemployment is able to be applied for?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know what the changes are for, do you have to be looking for other employment, that kind of thing. The law was built with the assumption that folks are going to be out of work for the duration of what this pandemic, what we're all going through right now. So each individual states will still have their parameters for what you need to do to keep collecting unemployment. This is just me speaking. I would not expect many people to be able to say that they've found new employment. I mean, we're at a time with massive unemployment like we've never seen before. It's going to be hard for folks to identify new opportunities. So that's going to be a state level thing. Each state's going to be different. But I can say that the law was designed to provide unemployment benefits for up to 39 weeks at this point.
Great, which, as you mentioned, is an extension of 13 additional weeks?
Yes, so it's whatever your state currently has plus 13.
Great. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our time here. Tom, is there anything that you want to mention that maybe hasn't been asked, or other parts of this CARES Act that you'd like to be sure that our health and fitness professionals understand as we move forward during this time?
I think we've covered the highlights that are most applicable to folks in our industry, but please keep reaching out to ACE and looking for us. We'll be making resources available as they become known to us, as they become released by the IRS and other institutions. We're grateful to be able to provide this service and provide some level of support. I hope people come away from this with knowing that there's some options to consider, some real things on the table. I wish I could make like determinations for everyone who's on, say, oh, go do this, go do that, and you'll get this. But unfortunately, that's just something folks are gonna have to do on their own. But these things are available. So I hope there's a little bit more, hope that we'll get through this.
Yes, yes, we will. And we'll get through it together. Like you said, Tom, if you are having any questions, anything else further that you'd like to understand, please reach out to ACE. We do have that COVID page up now on our website. That is general.acefitness.org/COVID-19. And a lot of information is there, a lot of resources for you as a health and fitness professional you can find right on that page. We will also be posting the recorded version of this webinar there as well. We will also be posting in the recorded version of this webinar on to our ACE Fitness Facebook page, and you can continue the conversation and we can keep asking questions to our resident expert, Tom Richards. Tom, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you all for joining us today. Please stay safe and stay healthy, stay moving, and we will see you next week for our next webinar. Thank you once again.